Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Karina Urquhart, and I'm the Executive Director at BIC and your host for this, I think it's the 8th now, in our series of accessible BIC brunches. So this event today is all about DRM and Text-to-Speech, or TTS as I'll be calling it from now on. In light of the requirements of the European Accessibility Act. So just before we get started, just some housekeeping for you. Some of you will already be familiar with this. So we'll have a questions section at the end. So once all the presentations have been given, please do use the questions box on your little toolkit. You should have a little questions with an arrow. Click on the arrow and you'll be able to input your question in there. This event's being recorded and is for BIC to use in its marketing and to allow people to watch this session later on if they weren't able to attend today. Don't worry, attendees won't be identified in the recording at any stage. Please note that while this session will explore DRM and TTS, it shouldn't be considered in any way to be legal advice by any individual or any organisation that's attending the event today, or in fact watching the event later on the recording. And we won't be able to address any business specific issues. We'll be conducting a short poll once we reach the Q&A session, just as an indication of where your organisation is with regards to TTS. It's not scientific, it's just a bit of fun. It's just to see if we can sort of gauge the temperature in the room. And again, you won't be identified in that poll. All your responses will be aggregated, so it'll be completely anonymous. And a gentle reminder that BIC is a neutral members organisation, and as such we politely ask that all speakers and all attendees avoid any conversations or questions that could be considered commercially sensitive or anti-competitive. We'll be sharing the slides and the recording later on, as I've just said. So if you don't get a chance to make a note of any links that you might see, don't panic. You'll be able to have access to all of those later on. And finally, please feel free to share our information and your thoughts, if you like, on this session to our Blue Sky account. We've actually come off Twitter, or X, as it's been called now. So if you're on Blue Sky, please do come and find us. You can see our Blue Sky handle there on the bottom right of the screen. Okay, so that's enough housekeeping. So quick agenda. We've got 3 speakers lined up for you today. We've got Simon Pallant, Digital and IT Services Manager at Gardners, Hadrien Gardeur, Reading Project Manager at EDR Labs, and Wendy Reid, Accessibility and Publishing Standards Lead at Rakuten Kobo. As you can see, there's a Q&A session. I've already mentioned that. Please don't be shy. Please make the most of our speakers being here today and their expertise. And I won't call out any names. You won't be identified. Your questions will be treated anonymously, so don't worry about that. And then we have the poll, and then we should be finishing by not 1:30, by 4:30. All being well. If we finish a bit earlier, that's fine as well. So I've got a lot to get through. So before we get started, a quick recap of BIC. Some of you will be familiar with us, some of you perhaps won't be. So for the benefit of those of you who aren't, BIC is a UK-based members organisation, and we sit at the heart of the UK book industry. We create standards, best practices, and resources, most of which is made freely available for anyone with access to our website, so for the industry at large. We help organisations become efficient, save money, become less wasteful, and hopefully ultimately greener. We hold a unique position of trust, facilitating UK and international industry-wide collaboration to reach agreement on dependable standards and best practices in the supply chain. And how do we do this? Well, we do it in a variety of ways. including running 5 strategic committees focusing on libraries, metadata, physical, digital, and also green supply chains. We offer events, training and workshops, and we also execute supply chain related projects for and on behalf of our membership and also the wider industry. We also operate 3 industry recognised accreditation schemes. But you can find out a bit more about what we do on our website. So you can see the link there to our website, and there's an indication there of our vision on the screen as well. So before we get into the main part of this of our event today, I just wanted to share with you our accessibility hub. So a little while ago this was new. It's not so new anymore. It's been up, I think, for a couple of months now. So it's free for anyone to access and covers a variety of topics, including industry standards, organisations that are working on accessibility, where to go for more information. There's training courses listed, there's pieces about the impact on the end users, there's validation tools, there's information on our accessibility webinar series, so you've got links to all the recordings on there as well, and a lot more as well. So please do go and have a look after this session. So the hub's evolving. It's a constantly sort of updated resource. So if there's any information that you can't find on there that you would like, please do let us know. And also if you have just any general feedback on it, we'd love to hear from you as well. So this is our accessibility series so far. It's been running since July, and this is the 8th one in the series, with more to follow. And it will be running until June, but I suspect it will run a lot further than June, because obviously June is the deadline month for the EAA, which was when we started this series was our sort of target month, if you like. But we have quite a few topics still to get through, so we will be running beyond the month of June. And again, if there are any topics that we haven't covered that you would like us to, please just drop us a line. We'll be happy to consider those suggestions. I should say all of these are now available on our YouTube channel as well. So without further ado, let's talk about the session today. So our speakers today are going to guide us through the accessibility requirements and impacts of DRM and text-to-speech. We're going to hear about the user experience with regards to these 2 areas. For example, when considering DRM and TTS, which elements make a book or content accessible or inaccessible, etc. And we're going to learn about what to consider when choosing a DRM solution, and also how TTS works and the opportunities it provides. And as you'd expect, there'll be hints and tips on implementation throughout. So without further ado, I'm going to go to Simon Pallant, first of our 3 speakers. Simon is going to start things off today by focusing on DRM. So he'll be talking about what do we mean by DRM, the reasons for using it, the different types of DRM principles, the effects that it can have on accessibility of content, and also we're going to hear how Gardners arrived at their DRM solution choice. So that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Simon.
Okay, thank you, Karina. Okay, so I'm Simon Pallant. I've been with Gardners for a very long time now, and for those that don't know us, Gardners is a wholesaler and distributor of both physical and digital books. And we've been doing and offering ebooks now for 17, 18 years across a variety of different channels. Initially the academic areas, but also retail and public library as well. Currently a range of about 4.7 million ebook titles and 200,000 or so audiobooks. And for the ebook range, just as a current figure, originally everything was generally arriving in a PDF form, and that's sort of changed over I suppose the last 10 years, and we now have a sort of roughly a 55-45% split between EPUB and PDF. So on the subject of DRM is nothing new to the industry. It was there from day one in various forms. What is it? It's digital rights management. The idea is that it's there to protect content from unlicensed or unauthorized use, and by that, that's generally copying or sharing of content, and this is about providing mechanisms to try and inhibit that. However, overall, there are generally sort of 3 levels within the DRM area. There's DRM free, which we offer for those publishers that wish to do it. Basically, the EPUB or PDF file that arrives with us is ultimately what is downloaded by the consumer when they purchase that through one of the vendors that we're working with. So they receive it as it arrived. We then have more recent soft DRM or social DRM, as it's often referred to, which again is no hard protection for the file itself. The EPUB file or PDF file is provided as was provided to us. The difference being that when the product is ordered, we go through a process that watermarks, digitally watermarks that particular ebook for that particular transaction with the details of the consumer, the vendor, date of purchase, and things like that. It doesn't necessarily plaster the consumer's name and address all over the place, but it does provide a audit trail back should the title appear somewhere where it shouldn't. It does provide a means of identifying the source of that. And then lastly, there is of course hard DRM. So Karina, next slide please. So by hard DRM, what we're talking about is a file that is delivered to a consumer that the content within which is encrypted and it's only accessible through an authorized or a compatible e-reader application. It doesn't matter whether that e-reader application is mobile or desktop. The encryption engine behind it can only be used by an authorized application. Essentially, the product is delivered. It contains a DRM wrapper that's applied to the content. It's unique to that individual consumer and that transaction. And it also goes on to describe any specific license controls for the reader app in order to handle the number of instances or devices that the product can be either viewed on or installed on. The duration of the license, so in library terms, that's for a loan period, 7, 14, 21 days. In the retail world, possibly retail rentals or limited life purchases, or more commonly perpetual or lifetime purchases. It might also describe the percentage of the product that can be copied or printed, arguably more appropriate to the academic world, but as a default, most of our publishers tend to go with something around about the 10% of the overall book region, but we, as others, can apply unique characteristics for that as required. And then there will be controls on other individual features, and with particular reference to today's conversation, text-to-speech. Karina, next slide, please. So just as a reminder, this is not about the pros and cons of hard DRM. Gardners and most other vendors that are handling contents are fairly agnostic and also pragmatic about DRM requirements. We essentially go on and do as we are asked to do. But what this is very much about is the effects that hard DRM in particular can have on the accessibility of content. Obviously, over the past few years, a lot of effort has gone into the production of EPUB files in particular, but PDFs as well, in terms of adding accessibility features, making sure that they can be consumed by anyone, no matter what impairments they may have. Now, the risk with DRM is, having done all of that hard work, we then come along and slap a hard DRM encryption system over the top of that, which goes on to ultimately limit or possibly prevent some of those nice new features that have been added. And that would be a real problem. Karina, next slide, please. So for us, we have sort of four main channels, two delivery methods really. So we have a fulfillment service for retail vendors, and by fulfillment I mean this is a hosted download solution. So we host the content, we encrypt it on demand, and ultimately produce a download link which the retailer will go on to, or vendor will go on to present to the consumer as they wish. This is also the same for our public library market. Only real difference in that environment is as far as the consumer is concerned, they're borrowing a book, so there is normally some kind of time wrapper on the individual license, and upon which that ebook ceases to function on the device. We also offer distribution services, so we deal with all of the main vendors. Generally, they have their own DRM solutions, so we are delivering the raw source files to them, and they will ingest those into their own DRM ecosystems. Some also use the same systems that we do as well. And we also then have our academic platform, which offers a choice of downloads, mainly for offline reading, but also a browser-based reading solution with a proprietary DRM system around that. Next slide, please, Karina. So the reasons for or how things started off with this, we needed to offer downloads in the main, certainly for retail and library vendors, and we needed a solution for the academic platform that suited the much broader range of academic licenses that are available, and so a browser-based solution was the most practical way forward for that. And if you can imagine, in classroom usage, lecturer, professor, teacher asks everyone to open the same ebook at the same page simultaneously. they can't all sit there and download the ebook first. So a browser-based solution was the best way forward. Next slide, please, Karina. And it's at that point, certainly with the public library and academic, that our accessibility journey started. So 15 years ago, slightly more, the public sector started to introduce requirements for increased levels of accessibility for digital content that was being made available to their patrons. And over the years, those requirements increased further and further and further, not unreasonably. And also each contract, generally 3-4 year contract terms, increased the requirements further and further. To start with, that was mainly around third-party screen reading applications. Two of the more notable ones being JAWS and Reid, Write, Gold, but there are many others. And these are packages which, or software packages which are not just for about ebooks. They're about software that's able to read whatever's on the computer screen and help direct a consumer to individual windows or buttons, or in our case to the reader window to then start hopefully reading or turning the text into speech, so text to speech. There were other accessibility features that were being requested more and more often, so allowing the consumer to change the fonts and the font sizes, customizable foregrounds and backgrounds, and the ability to change contrast ratios, requirements for descriptive text in images and charts, so alt text, as we've covered in previous sessions. But the main one, the one that ran through right from the start, was text-to-speech, and especially on downloaded content and within mobile devices. Next slide, please, Karina. So the text-to-speech area has always been a little bit of a challenge, not just technical, but sometimes commercial. Text-to-speech has, for some publishers and rights holders, blurred the area between text-to-speech and potentially ebooks becoming audiobooks. And that's understandable, but this is, as I say, very much about accessibility and the function of turning text into speech for the purposes of accessibility and nothing else. Next slide, please, Karina. So there were technical challenges, certainly for the established screen reading software packages out there. These were mainly technical, and it was down to often the reliance of copy-paste technology from either of the desktop operating systems, and one of the very things that certainly DRM systems at the time were controlling quite heavily, and couldn't necessarily differentiate between a genuine attempt to read versus someone trying to copy some or all of the whole book. Next slide, please, Karina. It was not all about the problems with the DRM systems themselves. DRM systems normally have developer libraries, so these are SDKs or software developer kits, which are available for normally under license for developers of software solutions, e-readers, to not only accommodate the DRM system, but to then go on and actually render the ebook within the e-reader screen. So that will be everything from building the table of contents, it'll be the text controls, it'll be the reflow operations, everything you would expect an e-reader to do. And although progress was gradually made, it was always one step behind in terms of trying to keep up with the accessibility expectations of the time. Next slide, please, Karina. And so the search for new options for DRM systems for both downloads and browser-based reading started. And the biggest focus was on the download side. The browser-based reading solution was always likely to be an in-house own development. Next slide, please, Karina. So where do we start? So in many ways, the academic platform, the browser-based reader, was the easiest place to start. It involved effectively a complete respec and then a complete rewrite of the whole browser-based reader environment and the underlying DRM system for it. We wanted to build accessibility very much into the framework of everything that we were doing. And so again, because of the unique range of license options available for the academic markets, browser-based reading was really the only viable way forward again. And we came up with a new DRM system for it that allowed us to control and determine the difference between misuse and genuine accessibility requirements. We were also, as part of an ongoing roadmap, we're recently able to redesign the reader environment to achieve the latest WCAG 2.2 requirements. We also built in a level of pre-processing of ebook files, which also allowed us to make some improvements on the accessibility of content overall. And also then build in to the reader itself the ability to utilize the device operating system's own text-to-speech facilities, which started appearing a few years ago. Then ultimately allowed us to go on and instead of building another standalone mobile app for mobile devices, we actually built what is a progressive web app, which without boring you always is basically just an application that shells a website. So it's effectively the website within an app on a mobile device, and allows us effectively a common code base, so that when we do want to make accessibility improvements or any improvements at all to the website, that automatically flows through to the VLE apps as well. So that was a huge leap forward and has been hugely successful so far. Next slide, please, Karina. And then for our fulfillment platforms, so this is where we're offering downloads. What we also had to consider is not just what was good for Gardners, but all of the vendors we have that are using that platform and equally have their own accessibility requirements and other commercial requirements as well. So this became quite a challenging area, and the process began quite a few years ago. Obviously, the DRM's encryption system has to be robust and well supported. There has to be minimal consumer involvement or awareness, ideally, of the DRM system. Anything you can do that allows for DRM to be there and for the consumer to be completely unaware is always the best way forward, and certainly a lesson we learnt from experience earlier on. The server-side software needs to be reliable, needs to be scalable. As I say, we've currently got 4.7 million titles in that system, and it shows no sign of slowing down. It has to be robust, and it has to be flexible enough to offer what is quite a diverse and ever-increasing range of license controls that we offer as well. There has to be a good range of developer libraries or SDKs available, so that we and also vendors can go off and build and maintain their own e-reader applications. They want to maximize the consumer's reading experience and make all of the accessibility features that are coming into and have been coming into EPUBs for a while now available to their consumers, and most importantly also make text-to-speech functionality available, and along with associated options with that as well. It has to be cost effective, and ideally the DRM solution provider should also be very active in the book industry, in the publishing world, and engaged in all of the current digital agenda subjects, especially accessibility. And so no particular surprise, and oh, thank you, Karina. No particular surprise. We chose Redium LCP, and we've now been running that very successfully for just over 2 years. Next slide, please, Karina. And so, in conclusion, and from what we've learned, huge amount of care needs to be taken when choosing a DRM system. But it does now, having brought that Redium LCP solution online, now mean that we have a DRM solution that caters for all of the current accessibility features, and with the involvement and the support available from Redium, the likelihood that future accessibility features will also be quickly supported as well. We have reader apps that cater for all of these features and possibly more. We have a complete text-to-speech solution now available within both our browser and also our Redium DRM systems. And although both are able to utilize those native operating systems, text-to-speech systems, both have been designed and built very much to make use of the new exciting technologies that are appearing in particular for text-to-speech. Yeah, there's some TTS or text-to-speech technologies out there offering really quite realistic human-sounding text-to-speach. But also, obviously, the world of AI is rapidly developing, and I know that there are a number of publishers that are exploring AI and TTS service engines as a potential way of producing audiobooks in the future. So there's a lot going on in that world, and exciting times ahead. And thank you. That's it for me.
Great. Thank you, Simon. I had written some questions down as we were going through, but you answered them all. So I was going to ask you about future-proofing accessibility features with DRM, and also about the consumer experience of DRM. Do they have one? Hopefully, if you're doing it right, they don't. Is pretty much, I think, what you're saying. They're just not aware of it. So
yeah, the best DRM solution is one that the average consumer just isn't aware of. It just never appears on their radar. Any DRM system that goes on to cause friction or complication or interferes with the enjoyment of reading the book is causing a problem somewhere.
what sort of interference would that look like? What would that feel like as a reader?
In the early days, and as I say, that this is as much to do with the developer libraries as the DRM systems of the time. But simple things like changing font sizes or fonts or color schemes, in particular, one of the areas I recall a lot of problems with is that obviously changing the foreground, background colors and the contrast for text was a key thing for anyone looking for accessible content, certainly the public sector. And those DRM systems or their SDKs, developer libraries, were always lagging behind the times in terms of providing those features, certainly in the way that we would have liked them to have done.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. I'm sure there'll be more questions later on, but I just want to also observe that 4.7 million ebook titles is quite staggering. So you have, I suppose, where required, you have DRM applied to those that you've been asked to apply it.
The vast majority, as in probably about 93–94% require hard DRM. We then have a smaller percentage for social DRM and a slightly larger percentage for DRM free.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. Yes, as I say, hopefully there'll be more questions when we get to the Q&A session later on. So thank you for that, Simon. I'm now going to hand over to Hadrien Gardeur. I hope that the technology will work. I'm just going to make you the presenter. Bear with me. Right. Coming your way, Hadrien.
Okay. So
do you have it?
Is this working? I think so.
Yes, excellent. I love it when it works. So just for the benefit of our attendees then, as I've already mentioned, Hadrien is the reading project manager at EDR Labs. It's going to give us a step-by-step, behind the scenes look at the mechanics of text-to-speech. So Simon's already touched on text-to-speech with regards to DRM. So we're going to learn from Hadrien now about how production can affect TTS, amongst other things, and he'll also show us that what is done for accessibility can impact text-to-speech, and also how to do it well and other things besides. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Hadrien. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll do a very quick presentation of who we are, maybe, just so that I'm not sure if everyone is aware of a European Digital Reading Lab. So we're a membership-based organization with over 100 members. We were created in 2016. We're a nonprofit. We're based in Paris, in France. But our membership is very international these days. So we really have members from all around the world. We do quite a few things. Among them, we work a lot on standardization, including EPUB standardization. We also certify Reid LCP, which was just presented by Simon. I'm actually the co-creator of LCP myself. And yeah, in general, we do a lot around the industry working together with, we have a very varied group of members, libraries, publishers, distributors. So yeah, we try to connect the dot between all those different organizations too. So what I'm going to try to explain today is how TTS works. So a lot of people use TTS, a lot of people knows what it is, but they don't necessarily have a good idea of what it takes to take an EPUB and actually turn that into an audio output. It's very much a black box. Even for people in the industry who work on reading system, it's a black box. So I'll try to explain how it works and how some of the things you can do as publishers, as content producer, can actually positively impact the experience of TTS and a read aloud feature. So if we kind of look at TTS step by step, there are a few things involved. The first one is we always need to extract both text and semantics. The second one is we need to process text. I'll cover that a bit later. We need to also add context. And finally, once we have done all this, then we can handle playback and highlighting. Highlighting is not always available, but it's often available. So if you want to have an experience where you can read and listen at the same time, which is very important for dyslexic readers, for example, highlighting is important too. So we'll cover that part as well. So what do we mean by extracting text? So you can think that actually extracting text can be mostly straightforward, that there's not much to say about it. But actually it can be a bit more complex when you really take into account accessibility. First of all, let's say you have an image. How do you convey an image using TTS? Well, in this case, you need to rely on alt text. So you've had previous sessions about alt text. Some of you may already know that there's a dedicated HTML attribute for that, alt. But there are other ways you can also convey that information in HTML using area, for example, a label described by. So if you have longer description, for example, you might use some of those. So that's, in this case, we need to extract the text that describes the image if we want to convey the full meaning of the publication to the user. Another thing that can make it a little bit more tricky is the lang attribute, so language. So if you have a book where there's a sentence in another language or a few words in another language, you need to extract that information as well. So you need to know which language is used for every specific bit of text. So usually you have a language for the entire publication, but yeah, language can change in the middle of the sentence. It can change in several places. So that's another thing we need to take into consideration when we extract text. And another one also that's not often mentioned, but quite important, is the ability to indicate abbreviations. So it's going to be very hard for TTS engines to handle those if they're not common. So some of them are common in specific language, but let's say that you have a textbook or scientific paper or something where you use very specific language, then you need the ability to indicate what this is all about, so it can be actually expanded when you read it aloud. So in addition of extracting text, extracting semantics is very important. We'll cover why later, but I'm going to start explaining what we mean by semantics. So if you design your book, your publication right, then you have all sorts of HTML elements. I've just included a few here, but things like headings, image, paragraph, table. So I think this has probably been covered before, but it's very important to use native HTML semantics because they convey information. So it's possible to make everything look right if you only use divs and span, but then you lose information, you lose semantics in the process. And this is very useful, not just for screen reader users, but also for TTS, as we'll cover. Another one that is very specific to EPUB is the concept of EPUB type. So EPUB type was introduced in EPUB 3.0, so back in 2010. And it covers a number of attributes. So some of them are used to do technical things or slightly more technical things, but some of them convey semantics about how your book is organized. Things like chapter, footnote, cover. It's a pretty long list actually of things you can convey. Some of those values actually have been added to specialized vocabulary called depub aria. So depub aria is kind of trying to connect EPUB types back to the word of area. So while EPUB types are very ebook, EPUB specific, aria roles are for the web. So depub aria kind of sits in between, but it's mostly a subset of EPUB types. So you can do the same thing, but using area roles instead of a dedicated element. You also have area roles. So they're not used that much actually when you look at EPUB, but some of them are quite important. And one of them, which is very important, is presentation or non. So you might have heard in previous presentations too about decorative images. So images that do not convey content. So you don't need to have an alt text for them. So it's possible to just give them an empty alt text if you do that, but it's much better actually to explicitly say, this is just for a presentation. So this is why this is important to extract. This way we know that there's nothing to extract from the image when you have that role. And yeah, just in general, any semantic that you had for screen reader users will also benefit text-to-speech. So it's really hitting two birds with one stone in that regard. So I'm doing something very dangerous, which is showing HTML on a screen, but I'll do my best to explain why. So I've taken an example. This is actually a French book, but with an English quote at the beginning of the book. It's actually from Stendhal, Le Rouge et Noir. So here you have a good example. You have section, but actually you have more information. So the semantics gives you information to say this is not just a section, this is actually a chapter. So this is information we can extract. This is actually a chapter. Then you have heading, which is in French, and then you have a block code, which is in English. So this is a good example of how there is relevant semantics here. And I'll showcase a bit later in the presentation how the semantics can not only be extracted, but also conveyed to the users through text-to-speech. So processing text. So once we've extracted text, well, you need to do something with this text. And there are actually multiple operations we need to do with text before we can use it for text-to-speech. So TTS engines work with a new unit called an utterance. So an utterance is usually in a single language because most TTS engines cannot handle multiple languages. And usually we break things down into sentences. I say usually because this can be a user preference. So one user might prefer having a full paragraph as an utterance, while another user may prefer just having a sentence. This also has an importance to how the output will sound like. If you extract sentences out of their context, this can actually negatively impact the prosody, so the rhythm and flow of the audio output with high quality TTS voices. With lower quality TTS voices, this doesn't have much of an impact. So this is all about balance in a way. Dyslexic readers might prefer just a sentence at a time. Other readers might prefer a full paragraph. And you're kind of trying to balance out their preference for highlighting or reading bits and pieces aloud with how good the audio output is. So yeah. So breaking things down in sentences actually requires language-specific rules. So you might think that we can just use basic rules, things like, oh, this is like, these are punctuations I know, and that's all I need to use. But actually cutting things down into sentences is surprisingly complex. Each language has different characters for punctuations. There are very, very different rules. So if you kind of try to cheat your way through this and do not take into account language-specific rules, you end up with half sentences or pieces of sentences instead of full ones. So there's an extra step here where we need to know the rules of every language. Hopefully, most reading systems can use OS level features to handle that. And then another thing that can also negatively impact the processing are abbreviations. So although there are a lot of language-specific rules, those language-specific rules usually don't come with a list of abbreviations. And those can be more than language-specific, they can be regional. For example, Mr., it's MR dot for US English and just MR, usually in the UK. So those can also be incorrectly detected as end of sentences. And you can imagine that if I end the utterance after Mr., this can be very problematic to convey the meaning of the sentence. So there's no easy way to handle this. Usually reading systems have to be not only aware of the language and language rules, but also come with dictionaries of such abbreviations. And when they're not common for a specific language, that's where the job of the publisher or the author comes in, since you can indicate how to expand this. And this is actually an abbreviation to avoid incorrect sentence detection. So that's detecting text, processing text. So once you've processed text, another thing that's quite important is adding context. So without context, it can be very hard to understand the audio output. And the verbosity of such contextualization can be very user-specific. So let's take an example. Let's say that I've created an accessible comic book, and I have the text for every speech bubble, but I have no context that the character is actually speaking or which character is speaking. And in comic books, a speech bubble is very different from, let's say, a thought bubble, or the narrator saying something. If I just read aloud the content of the speech bubble one after the other, and you don't know who's speaking, well, you won't understand anything at all. So that's a bit of an extreme example. Tables also a good example of that. But yeah, so it's very important to convey context if you want the user to understand what's going on with audio alone. And verbosity is very much dependent on the user in some cases. So it can be dependent on the book, but it can also be dependent on the user. So there are a few typical examples for that. Page breaks. So some users might need to know when there is a page break. And maybe they want to know where there's a page break in the middle of a sentence, or maybe they prefer to know that at the end of the sentence. So that's a good example of user deciding verbosity and when to handle verbosity. Another good example of that is footnotes and endnotes. Maybe you just want to be aware that the sentence has a footnote. Maybe you want the audio output to read aloud the footnote in the middle of the text, at the end of the text. Very good example also of something you might want to set up as a user. And of course, structural elements can be also very important. So let's kind of go back to the example that I showed before. So we know there's this chapter, we know there's this heading, and we know there's a block quote. So this is an example of an output I could have. I could have a TTS voice telling me it's the start of a chapter, and then it could say there's a heading left 1. It would read aloud the heading. In this book, it would be in French. And then it would say start of the block quote. It would read the content of the block quote, or you could say start of quote. It would indicate the end of the block quote and then end of the chapter. And that's just one example. Another user might say, I don't care about heading or chapters. You can just skip those things. But for users who rely primarily on audio, these are very important information. So the fact that you put it into the HTML makes it possible for screen readers and TTS engines to convey them back to the users. And then the last bit, of course, is playback and highlighting. So once we've divided things into utterance, we send it to the TTS engine for playback. Usually the playback is continuous, but that's not always the case. So in specialized reading systems, reading apps, it might be important to let the user decide, for example, if after each utterance or after structural elements, the playback should wait a second or 2 seconds. You also have other example, let's say children books. So you have a lot of children books that are in fixed layout, where you have one page that's very visual, highly illustrated, and then another page that contains text, usually not a lot of text. In this case, it might be better if you actually just read the text, but do not turn the page, because maybe the kid wants to, look at the picture for a bit longer. So playback, yeah, it's good to have it continuous, but it's also good for some type of books or some type of reading experience to control that and let the user decide. So oftentimes the reading app highlights the current utterance. So if the full utterance is a sentence, you highlight the whole sentence. If the utterance is a full paragraph, you would highlight all of that. And then that's something that's not always available, but some TTS engine, they return word boundaries as they're being read. So we send the utterance to the TTS engine, and the TTS engine gives us a callback to say which word is being read. That's not always available. And weirdly enough, some of the best high quality voices that use AI, machine learning, they don't do that, which is a bit of a shame. But if we get that information in return, then there's a number of things we can do. For example, we can do word by word highlighting, which is not always ideal. Some users like it, some users find it very distracting, but you could do both sentence and word by word highlighting at the same time. For example, one would be highlighted, the other one would be underlined. And even more important, this can be used to turn page. So if you're reading a book that is paginated and the sentence starts on one page and on another page, if you don't know the current word being read, then you cannot really turn the page. So that can be very impactful for the reading experience of the user. So yeah, playback and highlighting can be also a bit trickier than people would expect. So if I look at this in very high level in summary, I would say that the quality of the experience is driven a lot by the accessibility of the file. So good news, if you're creating highly accessible EPUB files today, you're also creating very good files for TTS and a real loud experience. Higher quality voices and good TTS engines can help up to a point. So some of them, for example, are capable of switching languages or covering a number of terms in another language. Some of them can handle abbreviations or guess them. So yeah, it can help up to a point, but it doesn't cover everything. So it's quite important to know that you do have to do a bit of additional work if you want it to be perfect in terms of user experience. And so yeah, investing in high quality EPUB files can actually help with automation of audiobook production. This is actually done already a lot by specialized libraries, especially Scandinavian specialized library. A lot of them actually already produce audiobook or media overlays in EPUB, so who have both text and audio. They automate that based on the EPUB they already have. But even that kind of requires additional checks and iteration. For example, in the example that I showed, the chapter number, it was 1, but I'm not sure that actually using Roman letters, that 1 would be read correctly. You might need to add additional information for that to be read correctly. So yeah, that kind of gives you an idea of what actually impacts the experience. So I've been a bit technical, I hope not too much, but another perspective that's quite interesting is user requirements. And there's ongoing work happening right now at the DAISY Consortium around reading app user requirements. So this is a working draft. You can easily find it if you look for DAISY Reading Apps user requirements. And there's actually already a pretty long section about user requirements for read aloud, so TTS. Once again, this is a working draft. It's going to change, but it already gives you a very good idea of what's needed from a user perspective. I've covered some of that, but this document is quite interesting to fully flesh things out, not just for read aloud, but also for other features. So that's all for me today. Hope this was useful to better understand how TTS works, and happy to answer any question you might have.
Great, thanks, Hadrien. If people are interested in that DAISY draft documentation, is there, and they want to give feedback, are there places within those links where people can send their feedback? Is it quite straightforward to comment on that?
It's on GitHub, so you can open a GitHub issue. I'll share that with you, so you can share it with the rest of the group, or add it to the YouTube video once you upload it. But yeah, it's completely open, so all feedback is welcome. And yeah, this is very useful because I mean, I've built quite a few reading systems myself on the web, mobile. And yeah, there was no such guidelines. So it's very weird because there are currently no rules telling you what you should or shouldn't do for TTS. So having a group of experts, people who work in the accessibility community, specialized libraries, who know what patrons, users need, I think is going to be very useful. In general.
Really useful. Our poll later on, be interesting to see how many of our organizations or people attending are actually using TTS, but we'll come on to that later. Just had a quick question for you, and sorry if it sounds like a really obvious question or a silly question. With TTS, you're saying that the utterances must be in a single language. I'm assuming then if there was, say, a foreign language quote within a book, that quote would be considered as a separate utterance, and that specific language would then be applied to that quote. Is that a fair assumption?
That is correct, and that can be a bit problematic because it can kill the flow of the sentence. So, and it can also be problematic if you haven't set your preferred voice for another language. So that's actually covered in the DAISY document. So the best practice is to change the language. So you would have 3 utterances. For example, if you have a word in the middle of a sentence. But yeah, it's being recommended now that the user can control this too. So if the user wants this disabled, they should be able to do that. And as I pointed out, especially if you're in a market that's bilingual. So Wendy is from Canada, that's a good example. A lot of voices for Canadian English can handle some French, or a lot of Canadian French voices can handle some English words. In this case, even if you disable it, the language switch, they would be able to pronounce things correctly. But yeah, it's best to let the user decide that. But it can be a bit weird when it happens for obvious reasons, I think.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Hopefully we'll see some more questions. I have some more anyway, but I'll save them for later on. Thank you for that. Really, really interesting. Okay, so we're now going to go over to Wendy Reid, and I think Hadrien, you're going to pass the.
That's already. I just did this right now, so that's
done. Brilliant. Okay, you're ahead of me. So yeah, just a brief introduction to Wendy then. I don't know if Wendy's got her camera on. So Wendy Reid is the Accessibility and Publishing Standards Lead at Rakuten Kobo, at least for the next 2 days. And she's going to share with us today her thoughts and observations on the variety of TTS implementations, use cases for TTS, and the opportunities it can open up for audiobooks. And I will just say that I think I'm right in saying, Wendy, this is your last publishing well, as far as you can predict into the future, this is your last publishing event. So thank you for spending the time with us today. And best of luck with your new role. So over to you.
Thank you. And yes, but I mean, who knows what the future holds, but I'm also excited to spend my last publishing webinar talking about a topic that I really care about, and I hope others will care about too. Actually, going off the last question you asked, Hadrien, I have a very funny anecdote about a text-to-speech situation I ran into with some friends recently. We were one of my friends here at Kobo is the product owner for our mobile applications. We were playing around with our new text-to-speech feature, testing it, and then another friend we're sitting in, we're testing it together, and one of them changed the voice that was set as the default to, I think it was the Spanish voice. And they're testing it, and they're like, I think I found a bug, and it was like, oh, like what's going on? And they're like, I think it's translating the book. This is an English book that we're testing in. And I'm like, oh, wait, like, let me try. And I go in and then try. And I was like, oh, no, it's not translating the book. It is just reading an English book in a perfect Spanish accent. And it sounds like Spanish, but it's not. And that's the, I think as Hadrien was kind of alluding to, that is sometimes the challenge with the voice switching, because it's using perfect pronunciation. And maybe if you're hearing it, you may not be able to even register that it's the language that you're prepared to listen to. So be careful with your language codes, people.
Yes.
But yeah, for my presentation today, I wanted to talk a little bit about TTS in ebooks. And I'm really passionate about this topic because I think TTS is incredibly exciting and it's something worth being excited about. I've heard from many publishers and authors about some of the anxieties and concerns that come with implementing TTS and what it means for their businesses and what it means for their users. But I want to twist this a little bit and think about, maybe this is something really to be very excited about. So I think text-to-speech in ebooks is not something to be afraid of. It's nothing to be afraid of. I have heard concerns around things like the potential impact on audiobooks, other digital products in your catalogs. There's concerns about rights, about sales, about what reading systems can do with your books. And I think that these are all fair concerns to have. I think it's important for us to have a conversation about, where these things overlap and where they maybe collide. But I also think that there are way more things to be excited about when it comes to the implementation of text-to-speech. So just for the sake of clarity, because there's a lot of features in this area, and I find sometimes in these conversations, terminology can get confused. Hadrien covered most of this in his presentation, but I wanted to be specific about talking about text-to-speech and saying that it's a software feature. In the ebook world, it is primarily implemented by reading systems and reading platforms, and it generates audio from text at the user's request and according to their preferences. So obviously, as much as the reading experience allows it, users can set this up, and it's driven by user request and user preferences. So it's not something that's going to get forced in or anything like that. This is for users, and it's at their request. It's also not pre-recorded, and it's not generated in advance. It is on device at time of request in most common implementations. Now, TTS implementations can vary widely, and I think this is why there is some concern about how these implementations work, and some concern about how the different parts of this can interplay. And I think it's important to point out that the TTS that most people are familiar with, or at least were until the last 2 years, was a very robotic computer-generated speech type experience, ranging from maybe boring to listen to painful to listen to for some people, and some people like it. Nowadays, we have AI that has obviously advanced massively over the last few years, especially in areas like speech generation and in consumer applications of speech generation. And now we're at the point where Snoop Dogg can read you a book, any book that you want. The realistic place that we're at as an industry and in terms of implementation at scale is somewhere in the middle. Most platforms, you don't have to use the robotic computer generated voice, though that is still available. But especially in things like reading applications, we're not necessarily using those super high end, super fancy, super fun voices like Snoop Dogg, because those require super advanced engines. Often they require cloud processing to be able to even do the necessary processing to get the sounds that you need out of it. And especially when we think about the way people read, often offline or in low latency situations, that just doesn't work on device. And so the preference, especially for performance, is to use whatever is available on device. Now, on device voices, especially in platforms like iOS or Android, have gotten a lot better, but it's still not, there's still the kind of gap between some of the really, really high-end voices that some of us have probably seen on the web over the last couple of years. I think when we think about text-to-speech, there's 3 really big use cases to think about, especially when we're thinking about readers. The first one is obviously, and most importantly, readers with print disabilities. These are the readers that use TTS as their sole means of reading, in addition possibly to a screen reader or braille display. These are readers who have learning disabilities or dyslexia, who need TTS to facilitate their reading. Without it, they would either have to use alternative means like Daisy books or audiobooks, or just simply not consume the content at all. And it's important to note that readers with print disabilities, they could either be consuming the content without the text or with the text. And sometimes audio is needed to augment text experiences for some readers. But that is the most important use case. This is why things like EAA have come to be and have required TTS, but they're not the only user group that we should be thinking about. It's not the only group of readers. Another use case for text-to-speech that I think is incredibly important is books that will never be audiobooks. There are a lot of books that get made into audiobooks, and increasingly, as we've seen kind of an explosion in audiobooks, more and more books are getting made to audiobooks. But there's a lot of books that will never be an audiobook. They're, think your really dry nonfiction, textbook publishing, like academic publishing, maybe small presses that just don't have the budget or the ability to produce audio, to invest in audio production, and self-published works, independent authors who, again, don't have the budget or the resources to use audio production or access audio production. The third use case that I think is the one where we'll kind of see a lot of growth is flexible reading. And this is where people who are, already readers of ebooks are reading their book on their device. Maybe it's an e-reader, maybe it's on their phone or a tablet. They start the book reading it normally, on using their visual perception. And maybe they switch to audio for their walk from the bus stop to the office. They just want to get to the end of that chapter, the end of that section. Maybe they're listening while they clean the house. Maybe they're reading when their eyes get tired after staring at screens for way too long during the day, which I'm definitely guilty of. I think about this as TTS is one of those examples of where the accessibility use case is essential. But like many other things in accessibility, it opens up opportunities for everyone. Think about, I don't know if many people know about this or have maybe experienced it, but things like captions in the last couple of years. Captions for television and videos online, they're initially designed and implemented for deaf or hard of hearing people. They're now an essential part of video, I think, for most of us. I definitely watch a lot of things online and on television with captions turned on. It's really handy if you're, scrolling your phone late at night or, Increasingly, I find shows have really bad audio mixing, and sometimes the background audio is louder than the dialogue, and I can't quite catch what that character is saying. And I'm not deaf or hard of hearing, but it's still useful to me. And I think this is going to be true for TTS for a lot of users. I think an important thing to remember in all of this is that the more barriers to reading that we eliminate, the more books people read. And the more delightful that we make reading, the more books people read. And the more books people read, the more they buy, the more they borrow. And we can see true growth in the ebook industry if we enable more people to read and more people to read more. I also think that TTS, in a slightly tangential way, presents an opportunity for audiobooks, because audiobooks still have a huge role in this, especially when in user interviews that I've done with readers with print disabilities, something that gets raised pretty often is that users who need audio love audiobooks. They really enjoy them. But sometimes it depends on the content. Sometimes it's, they'll buy the audiobook, but maybe they don't like the narrator, or they'll buy the audiobook and it just maybe doesn't work for some reason, or they want to buy an audiobook but there's no audiobook available for the content that they're looking to consume. TTS now, especially because of those advancements in the quality of the speech generation, it means that we now can invest in lower cost audio production for those self-published works, for those higher quality like audio scenarios for lower costs. I know that many alternative format providers use things like text-to-speech to generate parts of books that are not great for human narrators to read. Think your bibliographies, your tables of contents. Making that in even higher quality just makes the audiobook experience even more seamless and enjoyable. It also means now that self-published authors or small presses can produce high quality audio products at a scale that they just never would have been able to before. It wasn't that they didn't want to, it's just that they didn't have the resources. And now we have the resources to be able to do that. The other thing that I think that this creates is an increased interest in audiobooks that offer something beyond just someone reading the book. I think about there's a publisher called Graphic Audio that specializes in really high quality audiobook versions of that include things like cast narration, sound effects, background audio. It is not just the audio version of a book, it is an experience unto itself. And it's a really interesting and creative way to look at, audiobooks as a product. My personal thing that I would love to see over the next couple of years in digital publishing is combining ebook and audiobook editions more, using things like Smile or media overlays, creating enhanced text-to-speech experiences. So you're not just relying on that robot, on that, flat computer-generated voice. Like even if it sounds very human, it still doesn't have the emotion or the character that a human narrator still wins in the AI battle. And so using, existing technologies like EPUB and audio together means we could have even better text-to-speech experiences because they're built into the books by publishers. That's where I drop here. I hope I've convinced some of you to embrace text-to-speech, and I'm really excited to see what happens.
Great, thanks, Wendy. I love your quote there. The more barriers to reading we eliminate, the more books people read. I think that really, sums up everything we've been talking about across this whole series of accessibility webinars, but also not just our webinars, but as an industry, all the accessibility conversations that we've all been having individually and in larger groups and within our own organizations. So yeah, I think that's really important to remember. And also it's interesting, isn't it, that the relationship between, or what we're seeing as the emerging relationship between AI and TTS and that sort of relationship as well with digital audio, and how there are benefits to be sort of gained in all areas really. So yeah, okay, thank you. So it's now time, oh no, it's not time for questions, it's time for the poll. So if you could hand me back control of the slides, please, Wendy? That would be great.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. So now we're going to do the poll. Hopefully this will work. Just some quick questions. So let me go. Remember how to do this. Talk amongst yourselves. Here we go. Can you see it?
Yes.
Excellent. So please do put your answer in. It's clearly not scientific, it's just to sort of gauge the flavour in the room, as it were. So while that's going through, it seems to be quite evenly split at the moment. Oh no, it's still going. So while that's going in the background there, I'll leave it up for a few more minutes. I won't leave it up forever because it's quite dominates everyone's screens. I'll invite our speakers to put their cameras back on, although I don't know if you'll see them with that running. But anyway, if speakers could come back into the virtual room, that would be great, and we'll go to questions. So I think, I know it's still going, 77% haven't voted. Some people are a bit shy. No, I think that's it. So just see if I can share the results. So don't think we can share. So we've got, I don't want to lose the results just in case I hit the wrong button. So what I can see so far is that 40% are saying yes, we're using TTS and we're happy with it. 10% are saying yes, but it's not great for us. 20% are saying no, and we have no plans to. 20% are saying not yet, but we're planning to in the future. And 10% are saying don't know, prefer not to say. So so yeah, so that's more than I thought actually that are using it. So that's really interesting to see. So thank you for that. Oh, we can share the results. There we go. Ah, you can see the results there. Just leave them up for a few seconds so people can see. Okay. So let's just see if we have any questions. So thank you for coming back. So let me just pull the question. Sorry, all these technical things we have to do on these webinars. So we have here. All right. So Simon observed that most trade publications have some form of DRM, but also that some DRM solutions interfere with TTS. Does the panel have a sense of what proportion of ebooks with DRM applied suffer from that interference? Who wants to go first? Simon, do you want to?
Yeah, a lot of it is down to the DRM being employed. Certainly our experience now is we no longer have an issue with TTS, and we no longer have the annoyance of it also sort of riding the back of operating system copy and paste facilities and things like that. So but other DRM systems, there may be still some that can't identify genuine accessibility request versus one of those built-in copy type features, or there may be some out there that just prohibit text-to-speech, but certainly not in our case.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything you wanted to add, Wendy or Hadrien?
Yeah, maybe just a few additional information. So with Adobe ACS, it is possible to prohibit TTS, but you have to actively do so. So I don't have numbers on the percentage of books where this is applied, but it's technically possible to do so. With Read MLCP by design, it is not possible to do so. So it's not possible to block TTS with LCP, and that was very much something we designed from the very beginning. So we dropped TTS limitations because we knew this was highly problematic, especially for accessibility. And then proprietary DRM, it all comes down to what the platform can do. So if you're using a platform that has its own DRM, you're kind of stuck by depending on what the platform can do. So I know I'm not giving numbers because I don't have them, but I think this kind of helps to separate things.
Thank you. Wendy, did you want to add anything from your observations?
Yeah, I'd say I think everything that's already been said is very good. The thing that we see too, I think more than using DRM itself to limit or restrict features is publishers want, like especially with TTS, it's often in the metadata that the restriction comes in, and so that's separate from DRM. It has nothing to do with DRM. It's more down to like Onyx, for instance, has the ability, has like a code for kind of turning on off TTS. So sometimes it's actually a separate question from DRM entirely, and like most of the like aside from how Adobe does it, it really there is kind of like it's kind of hard to parse like where it's one specific type of DRM or one specific platform, but in all cases it comes down to publisher preference. And so I encourage publishers to not turn it off, but they have to make their own business decisions.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So then, while we wait for some more questions, oh, is there another question? Oh, here we go. Oh, where is Wendy going next?
I'm going to eBay to their accessibility team.
Great, thank you. On the subject of DRM and TTS, I have a question, probably quite a basic one, but in terms of TTS, Hadrien, how far can users control their preferences? So you mentioned about footnotes, page breaks, etc., etc. Are they able? What are they able to control? What kind of can they not get access to? What they can't control, or can they control pretty much everything?
So there's a big difference today between what I would call general reading systems and specialized ones. So specialized one have more controls than general one. General reading systems today are actually very basic. Like most of them don't do contextualization. They don't give you a lot of options, if any at all. So a lot of reading systems today only let you, start, pause, maybe skip to the next utterance, and that's all. But that's less than ideal. So one of the reasons why Daisy is doing that work is because the hope is that reading system will go beyond and more closely align themselves with what specialized reading systems do, or screen readers. Actually, a lot of things that you get from a screen reader could be relevant in a TTS context too. So what I've described is more the advanced use case. The common use case, there are not a lot of options. And it's kind of problematic because sometimes those defaults are not good. For example, a lot of read aloud features, they default to word by word highlighting, which can be very distracting. It's not a good, actually there's not a lot of papers that shows this is a good thing. So yeah, more options is better. I think it also changed over time. I mean, visual adjustment display preferences have changed over time. They used to be very basic, and now most reading systems have specialized fonts, better control over word spacing, letter spacing, that kind of stuff. I think we're very much going to see the same thing happening with TTS. So right now we have the very basic version, and over time, hopefully, we'll get more and more options like we did for visuals.
Brilliant. Thank you. Just would like to encourage our attendees to put any questions they may have in. We are over, although having said that, we are just on time actually, so we should probably think about wrapping up, but just sort of final call if there were any questions. That's whizzed by that session. I thought we'd have a bit longer for questions, but it seems to have gone really quickly. Oh, here we go. There's another question just popped in. Oh, are some foreign languages more challenging than others for TTS?
Definitely. For example, there are languages for which you don't have TTS voices at all. So language coverage is very platform specific. You see entire regions for which there are zero voice available or very limited options. It can be challenging in countries where you have multiple official languages. I'm thinking about Spain, for example, where you have Catalan, you have Basque, and yeah, for example, so Catalan usually have pretty good support in addition to Castellano, but Basque, for example, I think you only have voices available on Apple devices. So if you're on Windows, or if, they have Galician too. So yeah, this can be quite challenging. I would say that we're at a point where we're technically capable of generating new voices using pre-recorded audio. So you're seeing some companies doing a lot of work in extending their language support and also regional support. Microsoft, for example, has been very good at providing regional variants. So you can even have English, but from Hong Kong or a lot of different places. So it'll only get better and better. But yeah, there are an entire part of the world right now where they have nothing, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, I'd add there's like a big area where there's a gap right now with text-to-speech is things like indigenous languages, where there aren't enough speakers to obviously be able to generate models, but then there's just not enough source material to generate models. And there's work being done in countries like Canada, like Australia and whatnot to fix this problem. But it does mean that like, especially publishers, and like this probably falls somewhat into like academic as well, of like, if you are using maybe a language that has very few speakers or a language that has limited source material to generate text-to-speech from, like it might be worth considering developing your own audio sources or, supporting projects that develop audio text-to-speech engines for you, because we don't want to lose these languages. They're really, really important. And for like literacy reasons, like it's really good to have, text-to-speech engines in those languages.
Thank you. Simon, did you have anything to add or?
No, I think Hadrien and Wendy have summed it up very well.
Okay, brilliant. I don't think there's any more questions coming through, and we are just over time, so I will have to wrap up now. So thank you everybody for taking part today. I will just slide on. There we go. So yes, so just final opportunity really to say thank you to our three speakers. So thank you to everyone in attendance, but thank you to Simon. Well, and Simon, thank you for doing this session on your birthday as well. So that's very much appreciated on such a lovely sunny day as well, when you could have been outside. So thank you for spending the time with us today. Thank you to Hadrien and to Wendy as well, for taking time to both prepare for this session, but also obviously rehearse and deliver it for us today. We'll make the presentation slides for the event available on our website shortly, and they will be sent to you as attendees in the next couple of weeks as well. So if you haven't had them by next week, don't panic. They will be coming to you possibly week commencing the 12th of May. Yeah, so in about a month's time, this recording will be shared on our YouTube channel as well. And if you're signed up to our mailing list, you'll get a notification of when that's happened. So finally, to you, our attendees, I'd like to say thank you for joining us today. Please stay in touch. You can find out more about what we're doing at BIC via our website, and remember to take a look at our accessibility hub. We hope to see you at another BIC event in the near future. So take care until then. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.